Hola, caballeros. I'm here in Samuel, and it starts with the Hannah. She goes up, and this is very reminiscent of John the Baptist. This is the Nazarite way of getting into the priesthood, and so he lives in the house of the high priest Eli, and Hannah had brought before him, and she sings this kind of Magnificat, reminiscent of Mary and Luke, maybe chapter 2. Uh, she says how her horn, and that's Hebrew for her strength, is exalted. And she has this baby, kind of like a miracle baby. And it's because the story, kind of like Leah, she had a rival, or the story of Sarah, who had a rival. And the blessing was taken from Esau by deception, because and then Jacob was told by his mother to go with the Armenians, basically way up north, and marry her cousin. And this is similar to the stories of the couple generations before him. And after Hannah has this baby, Samuel, the ark is taken to the temple of Dagon. The Israelites, they thought they were going to lose a battle, so like they brought the ark to the battle, and it was like really scary for the Philistines. They're like, oh, they have a god, or they have Yahweh, they have Elohim in their midst. And so like when you're fighting men versus God, it's a losing battle. So it wasn't like necessarily it was their God, but like if they had Dagon as their own, it's not. But apparently they believe in a plurality in as much as uh, I don't know if the report had gotten on from Egypt, but um, that was the point. It says in Exodus, these signs and wonders, the really fearful ones, would make them known amongst the nations. And so they bring this, and it's just like, take courage and be manly, Philistines, otherwise you become slaves to the Hebrews, as they are your slaves. So fight manfully. So the Philistine nation said that, and the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated. Every man fled to his own tent. It was a disastrous defeat in which Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers. The Ark of God, now that's biblical proportions. The Ark of God was captured, and Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were among the dead. And so here they go. I guess it was all hands on deck, and these sons were wicked, and so this is how Sammy, who was like their little brother, you know, um, his adopted father, he adored him, and he was just like, "Here I am, Dad," every moment, you know. But it was like, oh, this is God talking to him, and so he was raised right from a very soulful kind of guy, being the high priest, and then but it's his his sons didn't carry on in his footsteps of just being righteous. And this is very important to the author of Samuel the Deuteronomist because it is about this exile from disobedience and then remembering. And so a lot of the reforms are either right before exile, exilic, or post exilic. That the word, Zechariah and Ezekiel to remember, uh, Zakir, would be like something that they're going to be dealing with uh, after like the 70 years of Jeremiah, when the land take its rest. And it says that when he goes in, when God goes into this Philistine camp, you can't contain God. Like, it's like when they tried to contain Samuel. Like, he brought the house down, and they all got hemorrhoids, and um, they were panicked. So they got the ark out of their camp because it was kind of like a Trojan horse, but like a reverse Trojan horse. Like the Trojan horse was the Europeans sent the horse to the Asians, the Trojans, and they took it into their camp, and in it was their own doom. And this is similar. This is like, but it's the other direction. It's like the Europeans got this ark in their camp, and inside was their own doom. And uh, it says here that the cart, along with a box containing golden mice and images of the hemorrhoids. Okay, so here I am. Chapter 6 of First Samuel, verse 10, the Ark of Beth Shemesh. And Shemesh is like, I think that means like the sun or the sky. But and Beth means the house. They acted upon this advice, taking two milch cows and hitched them to the cart, but shut up the calves indoors. Then they placed the ark of the Lord on the cart, along with the box containing the golden mice and the images of the hemorrhoids. The cows went straight for the route of Beth Shemesh and continued along the road, mooing as they went without turning right or left. And we'll see the same without turning right or left in the next book, where Amazel, the son of Zeruiah, and she was the sister of David, the daughter of Nahash, the mother of Joab. And he's fast as a gazelle sprinting at um, Abner, the armor bearer of King Saul. So I guess this guy's really big and brawny because dude would have to be going into battle with his own armor, heavy as that would be, and then even his chainmail. They had like these whole pieces, presumably, and this. So that's why the shield is so important, and so he'd have to carry his own shield, his own helmet, his own shoulder pads, whatever, um, as well as the king's, and he'd be very important too because the king's only going to put on his armor if he needs to, and that would be if it's a all hands on deck situation. And so he's directly communicating with the king about when is the battle going to happen. and the king's who decides when the battle's going to happen. And so he's got to be a strong guy, because when this quick as a gazelle grandson Nahash, which means the snake, is bolting towards him, he can just like take the dull end of his spear and run it right through the guy and have to come out the other side. And but so it says they're going neither right nor left, and the Philistine lords followed them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. The people of Beth Shemesh were harvesting the wheat in the valley when they looked up and spied the ark. They greeted it rejoicing. The cart came to the field of Joshua, the Beth Shemite, and stopped there at a large stone in the field, and the wood of the cart was split up, and the cows were offered as holocausts to the Lord. The Levites, meanwhile, had taken down the ark of God and the box beside it, in which the golden articles were, and had placed them on a great stone. The men of Beth Shemesh also offered holocausts and sacrifices to the Lord that day. And after witnessing this, the 5 Philistine lords returned to Ekron the same day. So this is the Levites doing this, but I think part of the Deuteronomist angle is not the priest, like as priestly, because things didn't go like that in reality. I mean, they were not following Zedek, per se, and they didn't have complete control over the area. It was like, we might get into it a little bit, but Samuel had to go up way up north, and because there Nahash, another Nahash, the Ammonite. So when Jacob in 27 stealed the blessing, he said he's going to be the Lord of all his brothers, and these are the Ammonites, the sons, and so because they're Lot, the nephew. So like, nephew's very important. Like David's mighty men, like, a couple of them are his nephews, but I mean, he's going to kind of have problems with all of his family. It's all going to be torn apart, mostly because of his sins. Because he was, he's a very sympathetic character, very much the protagonist, but he does some bad. He had some bad manners about a few things, such as one of his mighty men was killed under his hand in a way, and so they got it back. And why should you become stubborn, as the Egyptians and Pharaoh were stubborn? Was it not after he had dealt ruthlessly with them that the Israelites were released and departed? So now to work and make a new cart. Then the wait, I read that. Okay. So the golden hemorrhoids the Philistines sent back as a guilt offering to, I think that says Yahweh, were as follows: one for Ashdod, one for Gaza, one for Ashkelon, one for Gath, and one for Ekron. The golden mice, however, corresponded to the number of the cities of the Philistines belonging to the 5 lords, including fortified cities and open villages. The large stone on which the ark of the Lord is placed is still in the field of Joshua till present time. The descendants of Jeconiah did not join in the celebrations of the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh. They greeted the ark of the Lord Yahweh, and 70 of them were struck down. People went in the morning, great calamity, the Lord had afflicted them. And the man of Bethshemesh asked, who can stand in the presence of the Holy One? To whom shall he go from us? And they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiryas Jearim, saying, the Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord, come down and get it. So the inhabitants of Kiryas Jearim came to the ark of Yahweh, brought it to the house of Abinadab on the hill, appointing his son Eleazar as guardian of the ark. So I think Saul goes on to like kill these guys, Abinadab and Eleazar, and so I don't think that the sons of Eli, Hophni, were like the only potential princes of the line. But Saul goes on to wipe out all of them, except even though the people's choice is Samuel, who anointed both Saul and David, you still are going to find that there is like David not only kept a generation of Saul's sons in a way as best he could, but also of the priest line. So I can't argue all is not lost, but that's not. I can't argue that all is lost, but that's not to detract from my point at all that there was a change come in because there was no king, and the Deuteronomist, when he's talking about the prophets and all this, they're always against the kings because this is what Israel was. They had stolen the birthright from Arabah. And that's where David's coming from. David, that way down in, let's say, Bethlehem, is way down under in the Chattahoochee. It is, I don't know what they got down there. I mean, maybe because it's positioned kind of off a little ways from the Dead Sea, maybe like there's good groundwater down there or something. So you have these stories where in the like in Genesis with the terebinths of Mamre, where Isaac was another type of Abraham who dug these wells, and that's somehow claimed to the civilization there. But so when the Philistines had heard the Israelites had gathered in Mitzpah, so this is north of Jerusalem, and especially Bethlehem, and north of even Ramah. I would say Ramah is Ramallah, just north of Jerusalem. But I mean, even if Ramallah isn't necessarily south of Mitzpah, where this is happening, this is still pretty north, and it only gets more north from there because Saul is on his way up there because Nahash is I think the dude's like maybe a Midianite or something. But he's coming from he's encroaching on Gilead, and that's where they're going to make a stand. That's going to be maybe that's Kiryat Jearim. I'm not sure, but I don't think so. It's like some city up there where there was a holdout that and it all stops kind of near where the demoniac of I can't remember what it's called, the Gethsemane demoniac from Mark, the Gospel of Mark, when Jesus like goes to Golan area, and the pigs had jumped into like off the cliff and all that, and which is quite a ways from Mitzvah. But Mitzvah is like over where like Shiloh And I guess they had brought in the ark up a little further to Ebion Gezer. I think that's where they brought the ark from into the battle with the um, Ebenezer. I think Ebenezer is where they brought the ark in from. And so it says Samuel judged Israel as long as he lived. He made a yearly journey passing through Bethel, Gilgal, Mitzpah, and judging Israel at each of these sanctuaries. So obviously he's grown a little bit. He's not quite the young lad he was living under Eli's roof. Then he used the return to Ramah for that was his home. There too he judged Israel and built an altar to the Lord. So this altar, maybe this is where Jacob and everybody had, but it doesn't seem to be Jerusalem. I mean, it says like Abraham was in Bethel and that he had. Um, oh yeah, it says in Jeremiah, "Look at my house in Shiloh, where I first, had my presence." And so this is not Judah. And so it says, in his old age, Samuel appointed his sons judges over Israel. His firstborn was named Joel, and the second Abijah, and they judged Beersheba. Okay, so this is certainly down south. This is this is surely down there. I wonder how they got down there, honestly. His sons did not follow his example, but sought illicit gain. Therefore, the elders of Israel came in a body to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, "Now that you are old and your sons do not follow your example, appoint a king over us." So this is where uh, establish a monarchy in Israel, and uh, Israel delivered this message to the Lord. He told them, "The rights of the king who will rule you will be as follows: he will take your sons and assign to them chariots and horses, and they will run before the chariot." And when you read like First Kings, uh, they do have a lot of this. Like Sam Solomon, there's a long list, especially in the Septuagint, of all that he had like along these things. Um, it says, "He will tithe your crops and vineyards. He will give revenue to his eunuchs and slaves. He will take your male and female servants, as well as your best oxen and asses, and he will use them to do their work. He will tithe your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When this takes place, you will campaign against the king." And so they wanted to be like the nations, and he had this handsome son, Saul, son of Kish. And then there's the story about the lost asses, and then his anointing. And so then he takes a flask, Samuel takes a flask, and he pours it on this oil on Samuel's head, and he kisses him, saying, "The Lord anoints you commander over his heritage. You are to govern the Lord Yahweh's people and to save them from the grasp of their enemies." Roundabout. And uh, I don't know what the name of the Lord would be. I I would say presumably in the Masoretic it would probably be Yahweh, but I don't know. Um, as Saul turned to leave Samuel, God gave him another heart. That very day, all these signs come to pass. When they were going from Gibeah, a band of prophets met him. The Spirit of God rushed on upon him, and he was in prophetic state. And so the man of God and the prophet is very much a Deuteronomist, and they typically they're not well wishers, and they're not popular people. Jeremiah kind of went through it. He got put in a dungeon and everything. So Saul seems to have gotten this kind of spirit or something. I don't know. It's been a while since I read a lot of Samuel. It's been 7 years or something maybe for a lot of this. Um, Samuel next explained to the people the law of royalty, which is a charter defining the rights of the king, and wrote it in a book which he placed in the presence of the Lord. This done, Samuel dismissed the people, each to his own place. Saul also went home to Gibeah, accompanied by warriors whose hearts the Lord had touched. But certain worthless men said, "How can this fellow save us?" About this time, a month later, Nahash the Ammonite went up, so he was an Ammonite, to lay siege to Gibesh Gilead. See, this is way in the north, isn't it? All the, like, northeast even. Across the river even. All the men of Gibesh begged Nahash, "Make treaty with us, and we will be your subjects." But Nahash the Ammonite replied, "This is my condition for a treaty with you. I must gouge out every man's right eye, that I may bring ignominy on all of Israel." And if you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's more to the story that they had taken out. And so just then Saul came in the field behind his oxen. "Why are you weeping?" Yes, the message of the inhabitants of Jabesh was repeated to him. As he listened to the report, the Spirit of God rushed upon him, and he became very angry. Taking a yoke from the oxen, he cut them to pieces, which sent them through the territory of Israel by couriers with the message, "If anyone does not come out to follow Saul and Samuel, the same will be done to his oxen." In dread of the Lord, the people turned out to a man. When he reviewed them in Bezek, they were 300,000 Israelites and 70,000 Judahites. So this is like Menahem, like when Esau and Jacob, they were going to meet, and he wrestled all night with his fear of his brother, and because he knew what he had done to him, and he wasn't going to give it back, and so he separated his family into two camps, and so these are two different camps. These are the Israelites, 300,000 Israelites. It says here in 1 Samuel 11:8. There were 300,000 Israelites and 70,000 Judahites. So there's an ally between these two different people. They're an alliance. And to the messengers who had come and said, "Tell the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead that tomorrow, while the sun is hot, they will be rescued." The messengers came and reported to the inhabitants of Jabesh, who were jubilant, and they said to Nahash, "Tomorrow we will surrender you to you, and you would do whatever you please to us." On another day, Saul arranged his troops in 3 companies and invaded the camp during the dawn watch, and they slaughtered the Ammonites until the heat of the day. The survivors were scattered, and no two were left together. So Saul was accepted as king. With these verses, an editor harmonized the account of the acknowledgement of Saul's kingdom Mitzvah and the public acclamation at Gilgal after the defeat of the Ammonites. The Greek text of 1:11:15 reads, "Samuel anointed Saul as king instead of they made Saul king. Very interesting. But still, we haven't seen what they said in the Dead Sea Scrolls about how these people too were routed, and there was no that he eventually did get to them or something like that. So because there's like when you read Chronicles, it's like they're telling a story, they're filling in details that. So they're telling a story between the story. So like just as in the New Testament, you take Mark, and you take other sources and you add in to the lines, and that's much what the Talmud is. It's like, oh, something doesn't make sense, you're not sure, you gotta figure out what's the greater law, this and that. It's these arguments of why this is like this in the text, and the arguments are in the Talmud especially, I don't think are very good. They're basically like they're somewhat biblical, but they're very biased. They're basically like, well, because God just loved us more than them, and He made it happen in this miraculous way. And then they'll double down on it. Like, in fact, it was even more miraculous than you would think with this preference. Um, Samuel says, "The Lord is my witness, who appointed Moses and Aaron, and who brought your fathers up from the land of Egypt. Now, therefore, take your stand, and I shall arraign you before the Lord. I shall recount for you all the acts of mercy." Oh, but they forgot the Lord, their God. They forgot the Lord, their God. So this is Jacob. When Jacob and his sons went to Egypt, the Egyptians oppressed them. Your fathers appealed to the Lord, and He sent Moses and Aaron to bring them out of Egypt, and He gave this place to live in. Gave them this place to live in, but they forgot the Lord, their God. Jacob forgot the Lord, our God. He was the trickster. That's how come he had to become an adopted son of God through like becoming a prince through a struggle of identity. And but what the Judahites did in the Second Temple was they expropriated the name Israel, and this is mostly post-exilic. So it's saying that, like in Ezekiel 16, there was an older sister who dealt treacherously, like Hosea said. The first wife dealt treacherously, and so this is, as Jeremiah says, going to happen to the southern kingdom too. And uh, who they stole it from? The firstborn. So the older sister in Ezekiel 16 is Israel. They took it from Esau, who is mankind. So that's how the Judahites have interpreted the Genesis to this day. That even though it was originally the Judahites were Esau, who were deprived, in the Second Temple, they became Israel because of adoption. That with a contrite heart, with a remembering the law, by being righteous, having torn the vestments and rolling in dirt, put your head on the ground, all this stuff that makes one clean again and worthy. And so, because this person is worthy, they're the soulful one. And the soulful one, the righteous one, gets the inheritance. And that this is going to be very important in the New Testament, because the apostle, who is this, like we're reading about Saul here, his name is Saul too. That's who he was. And so it's the same logic going on here, that here he was a persecutor of the body of Christ, who is the Messiah, who is David. And David was the enemy of the state. Israel's number one enemy, because he was the enemy of the king. But it was all the king's fault. So David is blameless. And I got about 20 more minutes. Maybe 12. So he was supposed to totally destroy the Amalekites, but he didn't. He left like a few cattle and the king. But this is after he had won some battles against the Philistines. Let's read this here. One day Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his armor bearer, who was Abner, we talked about him, "Come, let us go to the go over to the Philistines' outpost on the other side." But he did not inform his father. Saul's command post was under the pomegranate tree near the threshing floor on the outskirts of Geba. Those with him were numbered 600 men. Yeah, let's not read this. So I guess they were just pretty tough dudes, Jonathan and armor bearer. The Philistines say, "Look, some Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have been hiding." The men in the outpost called to Jonathan and his armor bearer, "Come up here," they said, "and we will teach you a lesson." So Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Climb up after me, for the Lord has..." Oh, this is his armor bearer. "The Lord has delivered him into the grasp of Israel." Jonathan clambered up with his armor bearer behind him. As the Philistines turned to flee him, he cut them down, and his armor bearer followed him and finished them off. In this first exploit, Jonathan and his armor bearer slew about 20 men within a half a furlong. Then the panic spread over the army. Rout of the Philistines. And Saul swore a very rash oath that day, putting the people under this ban. "Cursed be any man who takes food before I am able to avenge myself on my enemies." Oh yeah, Jonathan stole the honey, kind of like Samuel's got that treat from something sweet that eats meat. Hey mom, hey dad, you want something sweet? But he ate the honey, and then there was like he drew the lots. He had the Uma Thurman, and he was like, "It was you. You stole the honey." He's like, "Oh man," and it's kind of like Jephthah. It's like, "Hey, I'll slay anybody," which is funny because that's really the story. It's a really popular Greek story. I want to say it's from like the Odyssey or something, but like yeah, that happened in Greek too. Like this whole story, like I'll slay the first person I see as a sacrifice if I get what I want, and then there comes their kid like walking out. Hey dad, like, are you serious? God, which is kind of reminiscent of Abraham. It's like I'll do anything for you, God. Oh yeah, we'll see. So Saul was told by Samuel, Mister studied in the house of the high priest. It was like, you got to cut down those Amalekites. I was like, bet. Yeah, I hate me some Amalekites. So they go down there and kill everybody. And who they leave? Go and put the sinful Amalekites under a ban of destruction. Fight against them until you have exterminated them. And then it says, so he tore off a piece of his mantle, which is kind of reminiscent of Jeroboam, the evil king Jeroboam, who he had a man of God, tear a remnant of his cloth, and that signified his loss of the kingdom, part of the kingdom. So Samuel did as the Lord commanded. When he entered Bethlehem, the elders of the city became trembling to meet him. They inquired, "Is your visit peaceful, O seer?" He replied, "Yes, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord Yahweh. So cleanse yourself and join me today for this banquet." He had Jesse and his sons cleanse themselves and invited them to the sacrifice. As they came, he looked at Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed is here before him." The Lord said to Samuel, "Do not judge by his appearance." So David's anointed, and Saul's melancholy. And I think like Samson said, "Oh, I know this kid that plays a mean harp." But harp is from Genesis 2, much as Genesis 4, much as this whole way of life of somebody that lives in Bethlehem is coming very reminiscent of Tubal Cain and even Ishmael, because if you go back to, I think it's Genesis 25:25, they say that Ishmael's descendants dwelt all the way from Halava to Ashur to Shur, not Ashur but Shur, and that means along the whole length of Israel, along the wilderness way. And I'm very curious how, it's like curse Esau, the brother of Jacob, curse um curse Ishmael, the brother of Isaac, poor kid, and but bless every son of Jacob. Like, even though you have the same motif of the hated one, Leah, and then the loved one, Rachel, Rachel's son Benjamin, and whose king is Saul of Israel. And they have Judah, and Judah, whose sister married Dina. Louis Ginsburg said married Job, and that's how it was. Like, if you read David's sisters, who's David's sisters marrying? David's sisters aren't marrying Benjaminites and Ephraimites, and you know what I mean. So then David takes down Goliath, and I'll probably save the rest of this for later. I had a lot I want to say, but I'm only halfway through First Samuel, so what if I get to the death of Samuel? No, that's too far. I don't want to jump that far ahead. So David, I already skipped a little bit of David and Jonathan. David and Jonathan are very close. So David's bestie is the son of Saul, but Saul, who's his employer, he lives in his house as his music boy, and Saul, who used to get great joy out of David's music, after David slays Goliath, the same music is driving him mad, and the spirit of the devil comes upon him, and he tries to kill David. And that's where I'll leave it. Stay tuned for what happens to David. You only see it here. Peace. Deuces.